Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dharma Helper and this is DH Reviews. This is my Season 1, Episode 5 review of Gotham. If you want to check out my other Gotham reviews, there will be a link in the description of this video to the playlist, as well as an annotation behind me on the screen that you can click, and that'll take you right to the playlist. Season 1, Episode 5 was called Viper, and the main story of this episode was about a drug called Viper that seemed to give people almost superpowers, super strength, but it was unstable and it caused them to eventually die, and their bones sort of collapsed in on each other, and whoever took this drug would die. And so on the one hand, we have Harvey and Jim investigating this drug and investigating the scientist who created the drug and trying to stop the spread of Viper and uncover the truth about, where it originated and all this different stuff. And then on the other hand, on that same token, you have Bruce, who in this episode takes up an investigation of his own into Wayne Enterprises and Wellsine, the company that might have produced this drug. And he investigates a little bit more into the, I want to say, political side of it, where he tries to figure out what Wayne Enterprises was doing and what Wellsine was doing about the drug and all this different stuff. And so that's the main story for this episode. And talking a little bit about Bruce to start off with my character roundup here. Bruce in this episode, like I said, he goes into a detective mode a little bit more, and he tries to figure out the connection between Wellsine and between Wayne Enterprises and between Viper. And we see him get out of the mansion, like I talked about in my last review. I wanted to see him get out of the mansion a little bit more. And we're seeing that in this episode. We see him go to the charity event and talk to the board member, well, not the board member, but the middle management person in Wayne Enterprises, and try to figure out, okay, what was Wayne Enterprises' role in all of this? And she lies to him and all this stuff. And the one thing I want to talk about Bruce is that while I do enjoy that we're seeing him out of the mansion and we're seeing him start to slowly branch out and become a little bit more social and start to build up the face of Bruce Wayne, what his line of questioning in this episode for the lady was a little bit too blunt and a little bit too direct. And the Bruce Wayne that we know is more subtle and more investigative and less blunt and straightforward. And so I hope that we get to see that Bruce will have to change and adapt the way that he goes about trying to find answers and be a little bit more subtle. And I like that we're seeing the stumbling steps that he's taking here, but again, I want to see him more evolved and a little bit more subtle and a little bit more detective work as we move along here in the season. And Alfred, in this episode, finally wrapping up my thoughts here on Bruce and Alfred. Alfred finally accepts Bruce and accepts that Bruce is going through some things, and accepts that he's going to have to stop pushing Bruce away and trying to shelter Bruce. And at the end of the episode, he starts helping with reading the files and working on the investigation. So we're seeing that relationship develop, which I thought was a nice touch for this episode. And I'm interested to see more of that and more of how that develops and how that eventually becomes Bruce as Batman and then Alfred as his right-hand man. So to see more of that dynamic, I think moving forward is going to be very important and very interesting to watch. Talk about Jim for this episode. Jim is cornered by Maroni because Maroni has that conversation with Oswald, and Oswald reveals himself and all this stuff. And Maroni picks up Jim and basically threatens him and tries to get to the bottom of what their situation with Oswald and Jim and Maroni is. So, like I said in my review, Maroni doesn't have a reason to necessarily dislike or even harm Penguin or Jim. Maroni is in direct opposition with the same people that used Jim as a pawn in their conspiracy and tried to kill Oswald. So Maroni sees that in this episode, and he uses Penguin to help him rob Carmine Falcone's casino. And he basically starts to put Jim under his thumb and blackmail Jim because he has that leverage over Jim. So Jim in this episode is, he takes a blow, and he's starting to almost feel the weight of Gotham City. And as he gets deeper and deeper into the underworld of Gotham City, it's starting to take a huge chunk out of his person. And I'm interested to see, now that Maroni has Jim under his thumb a little bit here, what Maroni does and how that relationship impacts the mob war. Because now with Jim under his belt and with Penguin under his belt, I kind of almost hate to admit it, but Maroni is at a very strong advantage going up against Carmine, who has dissension in the ranks and who might not necessarily have as much power as he would like to have. So Maroni's in a good position at this point. He's got Oswald Cobblepot, he's got Jim Gordon, he's got the Arkham Compromise, he's got that casino that was robbed. So he's really gaining momentum over the course of this episode. And to see what point Carmine stops talking about patience and at what point Carmine lashes back out is going to be pretty cool to watch. So let's talk about Carmine and Fish, and let's talk about that. Fish Mooney in this episode, she really starts to put her plan into place, not only with Liza, but with a man named Nikolai, I believe, Nico. And they have a back and forth in front of Carmine where it looks like they're arguing, and Fish backs Carmine up and says Carmine's the boss and all this stuff. And then later on we see that Nikolai and Fish are working together to unseat Carmine Falcone. And it looked to me like Fish is setting up Nikolai to be the fall guy for if anything goes wrong. So that's clever on her part, I thought, and very telling in terms of her character and her modus operandi, in terms of using her womanly nature to get what she wants out of other people and men specifically. And when I say womanly nature, I'm not just talking about sex, because in this episode, she and Liza had that whole conversation where she's training Liza to infiltrate Carmine Falcone and to buddy up to Carmine Falcone. And she, instead of the sexy sort of seductress scenario, she coaches Liza into how to almost be a mother for Carmine. And to me, that's an interesting look into Fish's character and an interesting way to see that Fish is using all of her assets mentally and physically to get what she wants in a world, in a mob that is primarily male dominated. I don't think we saw Carmine's whole operation in that meeting, and I think Fish was the only woman that we saw. So to see that she's able to hold her own and to use that motherly nature, we saw that with the Penguin when she sort of had him under her thumb and was manipulating him. And we saw that with Liza, how she manipulated Liza and said, you know, you may be my baby girl, but I'm not your mom and all that stuff. And so to see that, I was actually kind of happy to see that, because Fish Mooney was a character that I was a little bit on the fence about, and I'm glad we saw a little bit more of her strengths and her development in this episode. So talking a little bit about Carmine for this episode, like I said, he gathers his forces and he says, we have to exercise restraint because Maroni is going to be making a mistake at some point, and we have to wait for that. We have to wait for him to let him think that he's in charge and wait for him to screw up. And so, again, that goes back to what I've been saying about Carmine and how he's careful and calculating and methodical, and he's going to have that advantage over Fish and over Maroni. But at the end of this episode, Carmine meets Liza, who has that very 20s haircut. She looks like a very 20s sort of character, and it was clear to me at that point that Fish had made her up to look and to sound and to remind Carmine of his mother. And he has that line in the episode where he says, my mom used to sing that song to me, and you look almost, and then he gets cut off. So to see him fall for that, I was a little disappointed in his character because, like I've been saying, to me, he seems like a smart guy and a calculating guy. But again, that goes back to talking about Fish being able to understand the male mind and being able to use not only her physical attractiveness, but the mother mentality to manipulate people. And even Carmine gets manipulated in this episode. So really, the most manipulative thing you can do is prey on somebody's feelings about their mother and their love for their mother. And so that was a smart move on Fish's part, but I'm interested to see how long that lasts for Carmine. And I don't know if what his reaction will be if Liza is ever found out. So I want to see, out of Carmine, I want to see a reaction. I want to see action. I want to see what he does now that Maroni has robbed his casino, and now that really his whole camp, Nikolai, Fish, and all the other mobsters that work under Carmine are going to be pushing for retribution. Like I said in my other review, the big thing about the mob and the mafia is if you allow people to push you around, you're going to get killed. That's the only way that that's going to stop, is if you allow people to push you around, your people are going to see you as weak and they're going to kill you, or your enemies are going to see you as weak and they're going to kill you. So at this point, Carmine is almost forced to react and to send a message, and I'm interested to see what that message is and how far his wrath will extend, and whether or not he finds out about Fish and Nikolai, and whether or not he finds out about Liza. So that'll do it for my characters roundup for this episode. General thoughts on the episode: another really great episode, and one of the best in the season so far, in my opinion. And the reason for that is Viper. And Viper, the drug, we learn in the episode, is actually the predecessor to a drug that I was more familiar with, and I almost instantly recognized in the Batman mythos, which was Venom. And Venom is a drug that gives you super strength, and the supervillain Bane actually uses Venom as his drug of choice and as the source for his super strength. So we learned in this episode that Viper was the precursor to that, and I enjoyed seeing the origin story for this particular element of Gotham. And I think it spoke well to the series that they were able to introduce a very key aspect of the Batman mythos in such a way that people who were familiar with it, like I was, were still satisfied, and people who weren't familiar with it were actually satisfied as well and could keep up. And so that I thought was very well done on their part. And I look forward to seeing more nods like that in the future, where it's not too heavy-handed or too sudden in such a way that only people who understand the Batman mythos are going to understand the reference, but also it's not too light in such a way that it's not going to be satisfying for people who, like myself, were more familiar with Venom, and we wouldn't have to necessarily sit through a history lesson of 5 or 10 minutes per episode of this is Venom, this is what it does, blah, 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 blah. And it's not so much boring. It's still captivating for us who are somewhat familiar with the mythos of Batman. And the next thing that I want to talk about in terms of general thoughts is, I think the company was called Wellsine, and it was revealed that this Wellsine company behind Venom and behind Viper was a subsidiary of Wayne Enterprises, and that Thomas and Martha Wayne had a lot of opposition to the Viper program and to that drug, and that when they were killed, Viper was essentially reinstated and the research picked back up. So the thing I want to bring up is that I enjoyed that the Thomas and Martha Wayne killings are not quite as cut and dry as we had thought they might have been, and that we're seeing multiple motives and multiple culprits and multiple ways this could have happened. And it's almost like they're saying to the audience that you're going to have to put on your detective hats, and you're going to have to, alongside Bruce, the world's greatest detective, alongside Jim Gordon, you're going to have to watch very carefully here and piece things together yourselves. And I enjoy that sort of engagement and the sort of idea that they're not handing us these things, that they're saying there are multiple possibilities, and it's up to you to figure out which one you think is correct. And Wellsine and Wayne Enterprises have a huge motive in terms of trying to kill Thomas and Martha Wayne to reinstate that Venom program, and they have the means to do it, and all these different things that make them a huge and a really solid candidate for the people behind that killing. But also, like we saw with Arkham, anybody could have done that as well. Maroney could have done that. Somebody on the city council could have done that. Carmine actually could have done that. So there are a bunch of different motives and a bunch of different culprits in terms of who killed Martha Wayne and Thomas Wayne. And it's going to be really cool to watch more and more information about who these people were, who was Thomas Wayne, who was Martha Wayne, who were their enemies, what is going on, and why were they killed. So it's going to be pretty cool to watch all these different clues. We saw Bruce's board, his wall of clues, and I'm going to be interested to watch more and more pieces of that board start to fall into place, and more things being added to the evidence, and what happens and all that. I also thought it was interesting to see that the corruption of Gotham City extends into Wayne Enterprises. Wayne Enterprises in the time of Batman and in the time of Bruce Wayne, from what I understood, was a little bit cleaned up. And Bruce turns the organization around, and he makes it almost a philanthropic organization and a charitable organization and a shining beacon almost for Gotham City. And in this period of time, it's quite the opposite. They're very much in that same boat with everybody else. They are with the program, as we keep hearing. And that woman that Bruce talks to in the episode, she is also with the program, and they sort of tease at a deeper conspiracy than Viper and Venom at the end of the episode. And I'm interested to see where that goes. So I'm glad that we see that there are more corrupt people in Gotham than we thought. It's almost like we, as Jim Gordon has seen, we're starting to see that Gotham is more corrupt than we anticipated. And the weight of that is starting to hit us at the same time it's starting to hit Jim. So I'm impressed that they were able to convey that and almost surprise me. So with that being said, that wraps up my review of Gotham for the week. I enjoyed the episode, and I'm very interested to see where these new threads of the story sort of take us. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the review, leave a like. If you want to see more reviews like this, subscribe to the channel, and you will see those reviews as they come out. I do Gotham reviews on Tuesdays, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reviews on Wednesdays, and Scorpion reviews on Thursdays. And starting this week, I'm going to be doing Constantine reviews, which I'll talk about in just a second. So share this video on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and get the channel out there. I would really appreciate that. And going back to Constantine, later this week on Saturday, October 25th, I'm going to be doing a live stream review of the Constantine premiere. I will be watching live, talking with you guys live, and giving my thoughts on the episode as it happens, as I'm watching it on demand on Saturday. That'll be on Saturday, October 25th at 6:45 p.m. There are details for that in the description of this video. I encourage everybody, please click that and watch the video that I made yesterday about the live stream. It has a lot more information, and I hope to see you guys there, because this is a huge step for me and a huge step for the channel to do this live review. So the more support behind that, the better. I want to thank you guys so much for your support so far. It means a lot to me. And with that being said, I've been Dharma Helper, and I will see you guys in the next video.